So John Heilemann, Julie Swetnick, the woman we've been talking about, gave her first and only TV interview to you since leveling those allegations against Brett Kavanaugh. Obviously, she's the one who's the client of Michael Avenatti. Kavanaugh, in a statement released by the White House, denies the allegations. Swetnick is the first Kavanaugh accuser to speak on camera. Here now, an exclusive look at that interview, which will air on this Sunday's episode of The Circus on Showtime.
It's been a long time since the things that you detail in the affidavit. What is it that caused you to decide to come forward at this very moment, one day before the hearings, make yourself public?
Well, it wasn't that I wanted to come out one day before the hearings. That just circumstances brought it out that way. This is something that occurred a long time ago, and it's not that I just thought about it. It's been on my mind ever since the occurrence. As far as it goes, Brett Kavanaugh is going for a seat where he's going to have that seat on the Supreme Court for the rest of his life. And if he's going to have that seat legitimately, all of these things should be investigated, because from what I experienced firsthand, I don't think he belongs on the Supreme Court. And I just want the facts to come out, and I want it to be just, and I want the American people to have those facts and judge for themselves.
Of the things that are in your sworn statement, are there particular things you regard as disqualifying for a Supreme Court nominee?
I think all of the above. I mean, that's not the type of behavior that anybody at any age should do. I don't think women should be treated that way, and I don't think that any human being should treat people that way.
So, John, Ms. Swetnick's allegation is that Judge Kavanaugh was present at parties where she says she was gang raped, not that he was participated in those. Did you get any more specificity on her story?
Willie, you know, she was not in a position yesterday. She was not really ready to do a full formal sit-down interview. We got a chance to talk to her a little bit at the end of a pretty long day when Michael Avenatti and she released her sworn affidavit. So beyond the details that are in the affidavit, their position right now is they have potential corroborating witnesses, but they want to only bring those forward and to go into further detail than what's in the affidavit in the context of what is now becoming a pretty common demand on a part of a lot of people who are accusing Judge Kavanaugh. They want to have a full FBI investigation, and one of the things that she and her attorney both think is that, you know, that is the proper course here. What they're asking is not to be believed on the basis of simply her assertions, although she has made a sworn statement, and because she has active security clearances, if she was proven to have perjured herself, she would lose those clearances and lose her livelihood. But they're saying, we want to have this case adjudicated fairly. We want to have the FBI investigate. And we think, like a lot of people, that there is a rush now to vote too quickly on Judge Kavanaugh before, for his sake and for the accuser's sake, the truth can be sought in a reasonable way.
So obviously, John, we're talking about a lifetime appointment here. And I know a lot of Republicans are talking about plowing through and voting for Judge Kavanaugh for a lifetime appointment. But how do you do that without an FBI investigation, which maybe takes a week? But how do you do that? Because you're risking the possibility that an investigation does occur after he's on the bench, and maybe some of these stories actually pan out as being truthful. And then at that point, suddenly you're going to have somebody on the Supreme Court where everybody is going to be calling for impeachment hearings. So I don't understand the politics for Republicans to say we're going to just jam this through right now. I understand there's a time frame that they have to get it by. But again, if they had requested the FBI investigation a week and a half ago when everybody was asking them to, they'd have their answer back, at least on Dr. Ford by now.
Right. Well, and truly, Joe, there's really no time frame. There's no real hurry here, right? I mean, this is a Republican Party that kept Merrick Garland off the Supreme Court, kept an open seat on the court for 400 and some days. So the notion that there must be 9 on the court is contradicted by the behavior of the majority party in the Senate just last year. There's no reason why, for the sake of Judge Kavanaugh, if Judge Kavanaugh wants to have a lifetime appointment on the Supreme Court, I would think what he would want is a thorough investigation. If he's fully innocent of all these charges, have a thorough investigation, even if it took a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. If he could then have his name fully cleared and take his seat on the court without any shred of doubt, would that not be the better outcome both for him and for the Republican Party? Yeah. And I think you are exactly right that if they jam this vote through, and if these accusations, which are mounting. And there's the anonymous ones. I agree with you. The accusations I think we must take seriously are women who put their name to the accusations. The others at this point are anonymous noise. But the women who've come forward, put their name to their accusations, I think have to be taken seriously. And the idea that there's somehow the jamming through this is going to work to their benefit. If these accusations continue to be investigated and Democrats take the House of Representatives, I don't think it's not implausible to me that Democrats will try to impeach Judge Kavanaugh while he's on the Supreme Court next year if continued investigations of these things prove that they are legitimate complaints. And who can want that on either side of the aisle?
No. The jamming through of this does not help the Republicans. It's not good for the Republican Party. It's not good for the court. And it's not good for Judge Kavanaugh. If I'm Judge Kavanaugh, I want the FBI to dig in as deep as they can.
Absolutely.
And clear my name and let me get on the Supreme Court and without a cloud over my head.
So you can see more of John's interview with Julie Swetnick on this Sunday's episode of The Circus at 8 o'clock Eastern Time on Showtime. Still ahead on Morning Joe. We showed you something Lindsey Graham had previously said. There's also a decades-old clip of Joe Biden making the rounds about the role of the FBI in these situations. We'll put that into the needed perspective here.
By the way, Joe Biden, 1991, that's full Biden.
Yeah, I love it.
Biden.
Plus, former Republican strategist Steve Schmidt is here with his take on all of this, and Yamiche Alcindor, who asked a tough question of the president yesterday. You're watching Morning Joe. We'll be right back. Sure.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.